Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. The person who praises God is on the tracks of justice. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but if one will are to be lived. Love does not alter the beloved, it alters itself. To cheat oneself out of love is the most terrible deception. It is an eternal loss for which there is no reparation, either in time or in eternity. The more you talk about a person's virtues, the less likely they are to become virtues. Life has its own hidden forces, which you can only discover by living. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. Purity of heart is to will one thing. The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. Be that self which one truly is. A man who is a physical being is always turned toward the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him, finally turns inward and discovers that the source is within him. Faith is the highest passion in a human being. Don't forget to love yourself. Patience is necessary, and one cannot reap immediately where one has sown. The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. A person who seeks truth should be skeptical of his own thoughts. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. To not dare is to lose oneself. Genius never desires what does not exist. Truth is not introduced into the individual from without, but was within him all the time. Wherever there is a crowd, there is untruth. Only one deception is possible in the infinite sense, self-deception. Take it and return it, the kiss of love. That is the road we all have to take over the bridge of sight into eternity. To the frivolous, Christianity is certainly not glad tidings, for it wishes first of all to make them serious. Most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly one you'll never have. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, the other is to refuse to believe what is true. One can advise comfortably from a safe port. Trouble is the common denominator of the living. It is the great equalizer. There is nothing with which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming. If anyone on the verge of actions should judge himself according to the outcome, he would never begin. It belongs to the imperfection of everything human that man can only attain his desire by passing through its opposite. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. It is essential in relationships and all tasks that we concentrate only on what is most significant and important. Personality is only ripe when a man has made the truth his own. Far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. Love is all, it gives all, and it takes all. When one has once fully entered the realm of love, the world, no matter how imperfect, becomes rich and beautiful. It consists solely of opportunities for love. Men think that it is impossible for a human being to love his enemies, for enemies are hardly able to endure the sight of one another. Well, then shut your eye, and your enemy looks just like your neighbor. Unhappiness is not to love without being loved, but to be loved when one does not love. There are many people who arrive at conclusions in life much the way schoolboys do. They cheat their teachers by copying the answer book without having worked the problem themselves. If a person does not become what he understands, then he does not understand it either. It is wretched to have an abundance of intentions and a poverty of action, to be rich in truths and poor in virtues. Take away paradox from the thinker, and you have a professor. Ulysses was not comely, but he was eloquent, yet he fired two goddesses of the sea with love. Love does not alter the beloved, it alters itself. Happiness is the greatest hiding place for despair. Once you are born in this world, you're old enough to die. The truth is lived before it is understood. It must be fought for, tested, and appropriated. Truth is the way. Anyone will easily understand it if he just gives himself to it. To be a woman is something so strange, so confusing and so complicated that only a woman could put up with it. Confidence is the present tense of hope. The unhappy person is never present to themselves because they always live in the past or the future. Don't you know that a midnight hour comes when everyone has to take off his mask? Do you think life always lets itself be trifled with? Do you think you can sneak off a little before midnight to escape this? It is better to try something and fail than to try nothing and succeed. The result may be the same, but you won't be. We always grow more through defeats than victories. During the first period of our lives, the greatest danger is not to take the risk. When once the risk has been taken, then the greatest danger is to risk too much. By not risking it first, one turns aside and serves trivialities. In the second case, by risking too much, one turns aside to the fantastic and perhaps to presumption. Affliction is able to drown out every earthly voice, but the voice of eternity within a person it cannot drown. May new sufferings torment your soul. A human being is a spirit, but what is spirit? Spirit is the self, but what is self? The self is a relation that relates itself to itself, or is the relations relating itself to itself in the relation? Philosophy always requires something more, requires the eternal, the true, in contrast to which even the fullest existence, as such, is but a happy moment. The most terrible fight is not when there is one opinion against another. The most terrible is when two men say the same thing and fight about the interpretation, and this interpretation involves a difference of quality. When you open the door, which you shut in order to pray to God, the first person you meet as you go out is your neighbor, whom you shall love. Wonderful da. Pleasure disappoints, possibility never. For the sadness in legitimate humor consists in the fact that honestly and without deceit it reflects in a purely human way upon what it is to be a child. Prayer doesn't change God, but changes him who prays. Maturity consists in the discovery that there comes a critical moment where everything is reversed, after which the point becomes to understand more and more that there is something which cannot be understood. However much one generation learns from another, it can never learn from its predecessor the genuinely human factor. In this respect, every generation begins afresh. Thus, no generation has learned from another how to love. No generation can begin other than at the beginning. Where there are two people, there is untruth. God does not think. He creates. He does not exist. He is eternal. And this is the simple truth, that to live is to feel oneself lost. He who accepts it has already begun to find himself, to be on firm ground, instinctively, as do the shipwrecked, he will look around for something to which to cling, and that tragic, ruthless glance, absolutely sincere, because it is a question of his salvation, will cause him to bring order into the chaos of his life. These are the only genuine ideas, the ideas of the shipwrecked. All the rest is rhetoric, posturing, farce. It is more blessed to give than to receive, but then it is also more blessed to be able to do without than to have to have. With respect to physical existence, one needs little, and to the degree that one needs less, the more perfect one is. God is present in the moment of choice, not in order to watch but in order to be chosen. Therefore, each person must choose. Terrible is the battle, in a person's innermost being, between God and the world. The crowning risk involved lies in the possession of choice. How ironical that it is by means of speech that man can degrade himself below the level of dumb creation, for a chatterbox is truly of a lower category than a dumb creature. Jurists say that a capital crime submerges all lesser crimes, and so it is with faith. Its absurdity makes all petty difficulties vanish. The idea of demonstrating that this unknown something, God, exists could scarcely suggest itself to reason, for if God does not exist, it would of course be impossible to prove it, and if he does exist, it would be folly to attempt it. Whoever has the world's treasures has them no matter how he got them. In the world of the spirit, it is otherwise. If you want to be loathsome to God, just run with the herd. Faith is a marvel, and yet no human being is excluded from it, for that in which all human life is united is passion, and faith is a passion. Men are not on such intimate terms with the sublime that they really can believe in it. The deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than himself.